Time in 18 months. Russell Westbrook has been traded to the Utah Jazz. Agree to a contract buyout once again with the Jazz and eventually join the Denver Nuggets after clearing waivers, seeing them another veteran to bolster the team's bench. And
finally, we have a huge trade involving a future NBA Hall of Fame. And thank God, because to be honest, I was kind of fiending for some roster transactions, man. So before we get to the content, we are 20,000 subscribers away from getting to 1 million subscribers. So you want to help us reach our goal, make sure you check if you're subscribed and have our notifications turned on. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok as well. If you guys want additional content and to tag me in stories you want me to cover. And now that we get all that out of the way, do the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Over the past couple of weeks, we've discussed how the Paul George trade completely altered the course of the NBA. I mean, it was a trade that the OKC Thunder didn't really have much of a choice but to make. The Clippers made an offer that the Thunder just couldn't refuse. And once that trade was made, the Thunder went up to Russell Westbrook and asked him, what do you want to do? And at that point, Russell Westbrook made a decision that guaranteed that he would never have stability on a basketball team for the rest of his career. And that's requesting a trade to the Houston Rockets so he could team up with his buddy, James Harden. Back then, James Harden wasn't washed. He wouldn't suffer that crippling hamstring injury for another couple of seasons. So at the time, it was seen as a very interesting move. But since then, Russell Westbrook just hasn't been able to find stability on a team. He played in Houston for one season, then gets traded to Washington for the next season to team up with Bradley Beal. Before the Los Angeles Lakers, for some reason, decided to gut out their championship winning roster to trade for him, despite Russell Westbrook being paid a supermax contract and not fitting in with the Lakers at all whatsoever. This iteration of the Lakers was so bad, and Laker fans hated Russell Westbrook for it. I mean, you would have fans heckling Westbrook saying this.
Westbrook! I said I'm a biggest fan! Westbrook! Westbrook. Russell.
And even Russell Westbrook's demeanor would look bad. He would refuse to join the huddle at times whenever the Lakers were trying to game plan in the middle of games. He just seemed checked out for the most part. And I really can't blame him because I've always said as a Los Angeles Laker fan, it just looked right for Russell Westbrook to be in a Laker jersey. But the way in which this happened was just terrible, honestly. He just simply didn't fit on the court with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. So much so that the Lakers were doing anything that they possibly could to get out of Russell Westbrook's contract, and they were able to do so during the 2023 trade deadline. The Lakers agreed to a deal that would bring him D'Angelo Russell, Jared Vanderbilt, Malik Beasley, and would ship Russell Westbrook to the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz would buy him out, and Russell Westbrook would make a decision that honestly for him seemed like a good time. He would reunite with his teammate Paul George on the Los Angeles Clippers. He took a veteran minimum contract, well, because he agreed to a supermax contract during his last contract. So it didn't really bother him to take less money, and the very next year, the Los Angeles Clippers even traded for another familiar friend of his. For the very third time, Russell Westbrook would get to team up with James Harden on the Clippers, but this time with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Russ would do everything he possibly could to make sure this team would be successful, making the ultimate sacrifice, agreeing to come off of the bench and take significantly less money in order to make things work out. Russ was selling out for a chance to win a championship. And to be honest, this is the type of sacrifice that prolonged his career. Because at this stage of his career, Russell Westbrook's game hasn't really evolved. He's still a horrific three-point shooter, so all opposing teams typically do is just back away from the three-point line and dare Russell Westbrook to shoot, which kind of destroys the rest of his game. Can't really attack the rim as much as he was able to do back in his prime because no one really respects his jumper as much, which in turn leads to less assists. But still, he's a very solid role player, and for the value that you could get him at, he's worth a spot on your bench at the very minimum. Every single star that he's ever played with has spoke glowingly about him, except maybe Kevin Durant. But unfortunately, the Los Angeles Clippers decided to move away from Paul George for absolutely nothing, by the way, which means big changes were coming to the Los Angeles Clippers, and they were doing everything they possibly could to save some cap space. So with that being said, the Los Angeles Clippers have decided to trade Russell Westbrook to the Utah Jazz. Literally trade trading him back to the team that he originally got traded to by the Los Angeles Lakers. So the trade announcement comes from Adrian Wojnarowski. According to Woj, ESPN sources, the Los Angeles Clippers are sending guard Russell Westbrook a second-round pick swap and cash to the Utah Jazz in a sign-and-trade agreement for Chris Dunn. Dunn had a productive 88 games in parts of 2 seasons with the Utah Jazz, averaging 5 points, 4 assists, and 3 rebounds, and a steal in 19 minutes a game last season. He'll join the Clippers on a 3-year deal that'll have a team option in its final year. Westbrook is expected to agree on a contract buyout with the Utah Jazz, clearing the way for him to eventually join the Denver Nuggets after clearing waivers, sources tell ESPN. So to touch upon the Los Angeles Clippers perspective, they just get slightly younger at the point guard position. Chris Dunn has had a handful of games where he's looked legit, primarily during the 22-23 season, when he actually got to play in some meaningful minutes for the Utah Jazz. For the most part, what Chris Dunn brings to the table is defense. Defensively, he's always been very solid throughout his career with a positive defensive box plus minus despite being on multiple teams, which is a huge testament to him because usually your defensive box plus minus is influenced by your team surrounding you. But whenever you have a positive defensive box plus minus when you're on a team like the 2019-20 Chicago Bulls, it speaks volumes as to how good you are defensively. And I guess that's what the Los Angeles Clippers are looking for in this swap with Russell Westbrook and Chris Dunn. But I know the reason you guys are here, and you probably want to know what this means for the Nuggets and what this means for Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook is very likely joining the Denver Nuggets. This is something that we've been hearing all off season long. We didn't know the means in which that was going to happen, but it's really funny because like Woj says, once Russell Westbrook clears waivers, the expectation is that he'll join the Denver Nuggets as a free agent and bring them another veteran to bolster the team's bench and be available as a spot starter. And the top imagine Russell Westbrook reading bolster the team's bench. It's like Nikola Jokic when he sees Russell Westbrook's shot selection off of the bench. It's interesting because this is the second time Russ will be bought out by Utah, but let's get away from the fun facts and talk basketball for a second. This is Russell Westbrook's ring chasing era. He's trying his best to latch on with a championship contender that was very close to winning last year. If it wasn't for that meltdown in the second half versus the Minnesota Timberwolves, we may have seen the Denver Nuggets in the Western Conference Finals. And in my opinion, I felt like the Nuggets could match up against the Dallas Mavericks a little bit better than the Minnesota Timberwolves would have, and maybe they would have been able to make it to the NBA Finals to face off against the Celtics. But there's a glaring difference between the championship winning team of the 2023 Denver Nuggets and this past year's Denver Nuggets and the future Denver Nuggets, and it's their weakness keeps getting weaker. Their biggest problems get significantly worse. You see, last year, the Denver Nuggets lost Jeff Green and Bruce Brown, two of their biggest role players in free agency, primarily because Michael Porter Jr.'s rookie contract extension officially kicked in last year. That was signed in 2021. You have to understand, in September of 2021, Michael Porter Jr. looked like the next coming of Kevin Durant. This is when he came off of a season averaging 19 points per game off of 45% shooting from 3. So the Denver Nuggets thought that they literally had the next Kevin Durant on their team. I don't blame them for feeling this way, because by signing Michael Porter Jr. to this early rookie extension, they were hoping that they would free up cap flexibility for themselves moving forward. Unfortunately, Michael Porter Jr. has not been the next coming of Kevin Durant. Don't get me wrong, he is a 40% three-point shooter, averaging about 17 points per game. He was expected to be the number 2 option behind Nikola Jokic, and so far he just hasn't been that player. And as a result of Michael Porter Jr.'s contract extension finally kicking in, Denver Nuggets weren't able to retain Bruce Brown, and now the Denver Nuggets lost an additional role player that was vital to their success, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. So the Nuggets are essentially hoping to replace Kentavious Caldwell-Pope with Russell Westbrook. I mean, yeah, no team has ever tried that before. There's just so many parallels. It's like you're seeing so much stuff happening again. I mean, the Los Angeles Lakers traded Kyle Kuzma, Montrezl Harrell, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope alongside a first-round draft pick in return for Russell Westbrook initially. The Lakers became a shell of their former selves as a result of that. In order to fix this Los Angeles-based team traded Russell Westbrook to the Utah Jazz, where he got bought out and signed with the Los Angeles Clippers. Clippers. The Clippers then in turn traded Russell Westbrook back to the Utah Jazz, where he would get bought out and eventually sign with the Denver Nuggets. Now, obviously, the circumstances are way different. Russ is probably going to sign a veteran minimum contract here, so it's not going to be as catastrophic as his Lakers tenure. But I have to admit, man, for the Denver Nuggets, this is definitely not a huge upgrade. I mean, maybe Dario Saric will bring them some much needed depth, who they signed a week ago. Aside from that, man, it's very difficult to replace players like Bruce Brown and KCP. So let me know in the comment section down below, how do you guys feel about this, especially if you're a Nuggets fan, if you're a Russ fan? Do you think Russell Westbrook would fit in with the Denver Nuggets? Do you think Jokic Russ pick and rolls will work out very well? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.